The footage lasted less than a minute. 47 seconds, to be exact. In that brief slice of time, Emily Rhodes stepped out of her mother's sedan, crossed the dimly lit gas station lot, and simply stopped existing. The camera never blinked. The lens never shifted. Yet one moment she was there, framed in the weak yellow glow of the overhead lights, and the next she was swallowed by something the human eye wasn't meant to detect. Investigators replayed those seconds until their eyes burned, whispering to themselves that it had to be a trick of the light, a camera malfunction, anything to avoid admitting what the footage suggested. But the truth clung to every frame. Emily didn't walk away, wasn't taken by anyone visible, and didn't hide behind anything in sight. She evaporated from the world like a breath in cold air. The gas station attendant insisted he heard something right before it happened, a low, vibrating hum that rattled the soda cans behind the counter. He thought it was the air conditioning unit struggling again. He didn't realize the sound marked the last moment anyone would see Emily alive. And still, the strangest part wasn't the disappearance, but what the detectives found when they located her phone lying face down beside pump 3. The recording was still running, capturing a faint tremor in the air, almost like a rhythmic pulse, followed by a whisper too soft to identify. People later argued about what the whisper said. Some thought it was Emily's voice. Others swore it sounded like someone else, someone standing close enough to her to breathe the words directly into the microphone. But no one could agree on a human explanation for why the air around her seemed to bend in that exact moment. By sunrise, the first rumor had already taken hold, that this wasn't the first time someone had vanished on that stretch of Highway 47. The town had always been quiet about its ghosts, but Emily's disappearance forced old memories to rise to the surface, stories of people swallowed by shadows, of nights when the world felt slightly misaligned, of moments when time itself seemed to hiccup. No one took those stories seriously until now. Not until a girl disappeared in 47 seconds under a camera meant to catch everything and ended up capturing nothing that made sense. Key point number 1 revolves around the unsettling disappearance of 14-year-old Emily Rhodes, who vanishes from a small-town gas station in exactly 47 seconds, an event captured entirely on the station's aging CCTV system. This moment becomes the foundation of the entire mystery because of how ordinary the setting seems and how impossibly extraordinary the event itself turns out to be. Emily arrives with her mother after a long drive, stepping out of the car to stretch her legs and grab a snack before they continue their journey. The gas station is quiet, the kind of place where nothing remarkable ever happens, with flickering lights, a humming refrigerator unit, and the steady thrum of cars passing by on Highway 47. Emily looks tired but calm as she moves toward the convenience store door, a normal teenager doing something completely normal, which makes what happens next even more disturbing. The footage shows her slowing down and glancing around the empty lot, as if she senses something out of place, something she can't quite name. Her head tilts slightly, her brows draw together, and then the atmosphere around her seems to shift, though the camera captures it in a way that's hard to describe. Nothing dramatic appears on screen. No figure approaches her, and no vehicle pulls in to block her path. She doesn't run, doesn't call for help, doesn't show any sign of fear. She just pauses, frozen for a fraction of a second longer than seems natural, and then her outline flickers almost imperceptibly. Investigators later argue over whether it's a camera glitch or something far stranger, but the brief distortion is the only irregularity before Emily fades from the frame altogether. The moment of disappearance isn't loud or chaotic. It's eerily silent, almost gentle, as if the world simply decides to let go of her. There's no blur of movement, no shadowy figure, nothing to point to a person or force pulling her away. One frame shows her standing near pump 3, the next shows an empty patch of concrete with her phone lying on the ground as though placed there intentionally. Her mother, inside the store grabbing a bottle of water, returns to the car moments later and only realizes Emily is gone when she doesn't answer her call. Panic sets in instantly, but the gas station attendant, police officers, and eventually federal investigators all arrive at the same unsettling conclusion after watching the footage repeatedly. Emily vanishes in 47 seconds without leaving so much as a footprint out of place. This single moment becomes the anchor for every theory, fear, and question that follows, marking the disappearance as something far beyond a typical missing person case. Key point number 2 focuses on the strange flicker that passes through the gas station's CCTV footage in the moments leading up to Emily's disappearance, a detail that becomes one of the most hotly debated pieces of evidence in the investigation. The flicker isn't dramatic or cinematic, it's subtle, almost hesitant, like an involuntary blink from an old machine. Investigators initially assume it's a technical glitch caused by aging hardware, but the timing of it, occurring just seconds before Emily vanishes, forces them to reconsider that assumption. When slowed down frame by frame, the flicker reveals an odd stuttering of light across the parking lot, not unlike a momentary lapse in the camera's ability to process what it's seeing. The shadows on the pavement shift in a way that doesn't match the motion of the overhead bulbs, which remain steady and unbroken. The light seems to bend rather than dim, as if something is interfering not with the electricity, but with reality itself. Detectives try to recreate the effect by adjusting the lighting, the camera angle, and even shaking the pole the camera is mounted on, but nothing produces the same warped shimmer captured in those few unsettling seconds. This flicker becomes even more suspicious when experts analyze the footage and determine that the anomaly isn't contained to the camera alone. The lights in the background also pulse faintly, their glow thinning for a fraction of a second before returning to normal. Witnesses at the gas station recall noticing a moment where everything felt slightly off, like the air trembled or the ground hummed, though none of them paid attention to it at the time. The attendant mentions an odd buzzing in his ears, which he chalked up to fatigue, only to later realize it began at the exact moment the flicker appeared. Emily herself seems to respond to it. In the footage, she pauses mid-step and looks up toward the lights, her expression tightening as if she senses the shift. It isn't fear on her face, but recognition, like she has felt this before. Technicians later discover that the flicker is not consistent with typical surveillance interference. There is no static, no audio distortion, no sign of signal loss. Instead, what they see is a frame-by-frame compression irregularity, the kind that shouldn't exist without deliberate digital manipulation, except the system is analog and incapable of being tampered with remotely. This leads some investigators to speculate that the camera didn't malfunction at all, but that something happened in the physical environment, something the camera tried to record but couldn't correctly interpret. The flicker becomes one of the earliest signs that Emily's disappearance may not be the result of a human abduction or a runaway attempt, but something far stranger and more disturbing, a precursor to the exact moment she simply ceases to appear on the screen, leaving behind only questions that no one can comfortably answer. Key point number 3 revolves around the discovery of Emily's phone lying on the ground near pump 3, still recording audio when investigators arrived at the scene. The phone becomes an unexpected and chilling piece of evidence, as it captures sounds that the human ear struggles to interpret and that raise more questions than answers. When the investigators play back the recording, the first thing they notice is a low, almost imperceptible hum that seems to vibrate beneath the ordinary background noises of the gas station. It is not mechanical, like a refrigerator motor, nor does it match the rhythmic drone of passing cars on Highway 47. Instead, it has a steady, pulsating quality, like a resonance emanating from the air itself, filling the small concrete lot with a sound that cannot be seen but is felt. The hum is interrupted sporadically by what sounds like faint whispers, soft and fragmented, drifting in and out of clarity. At first, listeners convince themselves it is Emily murmuring to herself, perhaps reciting lyrics or talking under her breath, but repeated analysis shows that the voice is not entirely hers. It has a layered, almost otherworldly timbre, and the phrasing does not match anything she would normally say. The effect is deeply unsettling, creating the sense that someone or something was speaking too close to the microphone to be clearly identified. Experts in audio forensics are called in to examine the recording, trying to determine whether it has been edited or manipulated in any way. Their analysis shows no evidence of tampering, and the recording's integrity is intact, meaning the sounds captured were genuinely present at the time Emily disappeared. They also note that the whispers occur precisely at the moment the CCTV footage shows the flicker of light passing over her figure. The hum seems to precede it slightly, building in intensity before the final, fleeting whispers occur, almost as though the audio is reacting to some unseen force acting upon the environment. Audio specialists speculate about frequencies that humans can barely perceive, and some suggest that the hum may even be subliminal, producing a sense of disorientation or emotional unease. Listeners report feeling chills or a strange tightness in their chest while hearing the playback, even when they know it is only a recording. For Emily's mother, discovering the phone adds another layer of horror. She had last seen her daughter walking calmly across the lot, never expecting that in the span of less than a minute, the ordinary soundscape of gas pumps and humming refrigerators would be replaced with an unearthly resonance and cryptic whispers. The recording captures the last tangible evidence of Emily's presence, and yet it is incomprehensible in a way that defies explanation. It marks a pivotal turning point in the case, signaling to the investigators that what they are dealing with is far beyond a simple disappearance and that whatever claimed Emily's presence may not belong entirely to this world. Key point number 4 centers on the account of a truck driver who had parked near the gas station just minutes before Emily Rhodes vanished, offering one of the few first-hand observations of the moments leading up to the disappearance. The driver, a man who had spent decades navigating the highways of the region, insisted that he had seen something peculiar out of the corner of his eye, an unusual movement against the light near Pump 3. He described it as a shadow that didn't belong, something that shifted with a fluidity and intent unlike any normal human figure. At first, law enforcement was skeptical, considering the driver's long hours on the road and the possibility that fatigue or reflection from his own vehicle lights had tricked his perception. Yet his account was oddly consistent, detailed in a way that suggested he was reporting what he actually saw rather than embellishing or theorizing after the fact. He recalled how the shadow seemed to pause and stretch in unnatural ways, almost like a reflection detached from its source. His timing was precise. The shadow appeared just moments before the CCTV footage recorded the light flicker and Emily's disappearance. Investigators immediately cross-referenced his observations with the security footage, and though the cameras captured no figure in the area, the shadowy anomaly described by the driver aligned with the exact moment Emily vanished. The description unsettled them, particularly because the shadow didn't behave like any typical optical illusion or environmental reflection. It appeared to respond to Emily's movements, following her as she walked and lingering near her when she paused, only to vanish entirely when she did. This interaction suggested something more deliberate and possibly intelligent, though entirely invisible to the majority of onlookers. The truck driver also mentioned a subtle shift in temperature near his cab, a faint, almost electric chill that seemed to precede the shadow's appearance. The air had grown inexplicably heavy, carrying a low-frequency vibration that rattled his dashboard. He couldn't explain why he had stepped out of his truck to observe the area more closely, only that an instinctive unease compelled him to watch. When Emily vanished, he swore he felt the hair on the back of his neck stand rigid, an instinctive recognition that something profoundly wrong had occurred. Law enforcement included his testimony as a critical piece of evidence, not because it provided clear visual proof, but because it offered an independent confirmation of the unusual and inexplicable phenomena surrounding the disappearance. The truck driver's shadow report, combined with the light flicker on the CCTV and the audio captured on Emily's phone, began to form a disturbing pattern. Multiple sensory inputs, all occurring simultaneously, pointed to an event that defied conventional explanation. This account marked a turning point in the investigation, hinting that Emily's disappearance was not just sudden but accompanied by physical anomalies perceptible, however subtly, to those nearby. Key point number 5 delves into the shocking revelation that Emily Rhodes had been researching missing person cases connected to the same stretch of Highway 47, a discovery that added an unsettling layer of premeditation or intuition to her sudden disappearance. When investigators scoured her digital footprint, they found a meticulously organized collection of articles, photographs, and newspaper clippings stored on her phone and tablet. Each entry documented disappearances spanning decades, all occurring within a narrow radius along the highway that ran past her town. Some cases were decades old, fading into obscurity, while others were more recent and had received significant local media attention. Emily seemed particularly focused on patterns. She highlighted instances where witnesses reported strange lights, fleeting shadows, or anomalies in surveillance footage, and she made notes about the specific times at which people had vanished. Her research indicated a deep fascination with the phenomenon itself, a curiosity that went beyond the morbid intrigue typical of a teenager's casual interest. Her friends and family were blindsided by this discovery. To them, Emily had always been a bright, inquisitive girl, obsessed with puzzles and mysteries, But nothing suggested she was preparing for something as sinister as what eventually occurred. Interviews revealed that she had even mentioned Highway 47 in passing, warning friends that something about that road doesn't feel right at night, a statement dismissed at the time as a teenage exaggeration. The context of her research, however, cast her comments in a far more ominous light. Investigators began to speculate whether Emily had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time or whether her knowledge of the highway's history had made her more attuned to a danger that no one else could perceive. Forensic analysts noted that Emily's notes displayed a pattern-seeking approach, almost scientific in its rigor. She had plotted each disappearance on a rough map, noting distances, times, and eyewitness accounts, seeking connections that might explain why these people had disappeared. What unsettled the detectives the most was her attention to detail. She seemed to understand something about the timeline of vanishings, the precise windows in which people had gone missing, and even patterns that hinted at intervals between incidents. This suggested a level of awareness far beyond what casual research might provide. The fact that Emily's disappearance mirrored the very patterns she had been studying added an eerie sense of inevitability to the case. Her investigation into Highway 47's history, which might have been intended as an intellectual exercise or simple curiosity, now appeared prophetic in retrospect. Her fascination with the vanishings along that stretch of road became more than academic. It suggested that she was either drawn toward the same inexplicable forces responsible or that she had stumbled unknowingly into the exact conditions that allowed the phenomenon to claim her. This revelation marked a pivotal moment in the investigation, shifting the focus from viewing Emily solely as a victim to considering the possibility that her awareness of the highway's dark past intersected tragically with her fate, raising unsettling questions about foresight, coincidence, and the invisible forces at work along Highway 47. Key point number 6 revolves around the unnerving discovery that the low, vibrating hum captured on Emily Rhodes' phone corresponds to a frequency previously recorded in an abandoned military research facility located 16 miles from the gas station. When investigators consulted audio specialists and cross-referenced the recording with historical data, they found an almost impossible match. The hum fell into a specific range associated with experiments conducted at the facility decades earlier. According to declassified documents and interviews with former employees, the facility had conducted tests on acoustic resonance, electromagnetic pulses, and other phenomena that interacted with the physical environment in subtle yet measurable ways. Though the facility had been shuttered for years, the evidence suggested that the hum was not merely incidental background noise but part of a pattern connected to residual energy in the area or possibly a lingering artifact of the experimental technology once housed there. The idea that a sound originating from a place long abandoned could intersect with a disappearance 16 miles away immediately captured the attention of federal investigators, who recognized that conventional explanations were insufficient. Specialists in acoustics and wave propagation were brought in to study the phenomenon, and they confirmed that the hum's frequency was remarkably precise, the kind of signal one would expect from controlled experiments rather than natural sources. More puzzlingly, the hum seemed to carry certain modulations, almost like a hidden message embedded within the resonance. When slowed down and analyzed using spectral imaging, the audio revealed faint oscillations that repeated at intervals consistent with timing anomalies recorded in past disappearances along Highway 47. This link suggested that Emily's disappearance might be connected not just to the environment around the gas station, but to a larger system of unexplained occurrences spanning decades. The proximity of the military facility raised more questions than answers. Was there residual energy from experimental devices that had somehow influenced the area around Highway 47? Could Emily's sudden disappearance be linked to conditions deliberately engineered or accidentally created decades earlier? Former employees of the facility spoke cautiously, hinting at experiments designed to manipulate perception, spatial awareness, or even time intervals within localized fields. While their accounts were fragmented and often contradictory, they agreed that certain interval events had been observed during their work, incidents in which objects or people appeared to vanish briefly, sometimes returning, sometimes not. This discovery connected the strange audio with a physical location that had no known activity for decades, creating an unnerving bridge between Emily's disappearance and past events that had been similarly enigmatic. Investigators began to consider the possibility that what she experienced at the gas station was not random, but an intersection of residual energy, environmental anomalies, and unknown forces originating from the long-abandoned facility, making the case increasingly complex and deeply unsettling, and hinting that the hum on her phone was far more than a coincidental background sound. Key point number 7 centers on the testimony of a former technician from the abandoned military research facility, whose account adds a chilling and almost conspiratorial dimension to Emily Rhodes' disappearance. This technician, now living in quiet obscurity, came forward reluctantly after investigators linked the humming frequency on Emily's phone to the facility's experiments. He described the work carried out there as highly classified, involving experiments that sought to manipulate the perception of time, space, and consciousness within localized zones. According to him, certain tests had produced what the staff internally referred to as interval events, moments when objects or living beings temporarily ceased to register within normal physical parameters. These were never publicly documented, and records were often intentionally destroyed or falsified to maintain secrecy. The technician stressed that, while rare, these events were highly controlled in the facility, occurring only under precise conditions, yet he admitted that even small deviations could produce unpredictable and sometimes permanent results. The realization that Emily's disappearance shared striking similarities with these interval events unsettled everyone involved in the investigation, implying that what had claimed her might not have been a human threat but a phenomenon with experimental origins long abandoned. He recounted specific incidents in which animals, equipment, or even a few staff members had momentarily vanished within designated test chambers. When they reappeared, subtle differences could be observed, changes in behavior, memory lapses, or physical disorientation. He emphasized that these occurrences had never been explained and that the facility had ultimately been shut down due to ethical concerns and repeated accidents. Yet, he conceded that the geographic footprint of some experiments might have extended beyond the facility itself, unintentionally affecting areas along Highway 47. This revelation suggested that residual effects from decades-old experiments could persist in the environment, perhaps interacting with unsuspecting individuals who entered the affected zones. The technician also revealed that during his tenure, patterns had been noted in the timing and duration of these interval events, often occurring in precise time windows, sometimes under a minute, which eerily mirrored the 4 to 7 seconds it took for Emily to vanish. He admitted that investigators would likely find the correlations improbable, yet the coincidences were difficult to ignore. The location, the timing, and the unusual auditory phenomena all aligned with what he had witnessed during classified operations. His testimony shifted the focus of the case from conventional explanations, abduction, foul play, or accident, to a possibility that was both terrifying and incomprehensible: that Emily's disappearance might have been the result of forces connected to a long-forgotten scientific endeavor, a phenomenon that defied natural law and human understanding. Investigators were left grappling with the notion that Highway 47 might harbor conditions capable of producing an event once thought only possible in highly controlled experimental settings, and that Emily had unwittingly become part of one such event, leaving behind evidence that was both eerie and hauntingly precise. Key point number 8 focuses on the disturbing pattern that investigators uncover as they examine Emily Rhodes' disappearance in the context of other cases along Highway 47. As authorities dig deeper, they realize that her vanishing was not an isolated event, but part of a recurring phenomenon in which victims disappear within remarkably brief time windows, always under 60 seconds. This realization transforms the case from a standard missing person investigation into something far more inexplicable and chilling. Analysts combed through decades of police reports, media accounts, and eyewitness testimonies, and each incident shared eerily similar characteristics. The victim would be performing mundane activities, often in public or semi-public settings, and then vanish almost instantaneously, leaving behind little to no evidence. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no witnesses who could identify a perpetrator, and often the only records were partial audio or grainy footage, which frequently displayed anomalies like sudden flickers or distortions. The pattern was consistent enough to suggest that the disappearances were linked not to human intervention but to some unknown force operating within strict temporal parameters. The timing of the disappearances became one of the most compelling aspects of the investigation. Analysts noted that in each documented case, the interval between the victim's last observable movement and the moment they ceased to exist was exceptionally brief, almost ritualistically precise. In Emily's case, It was 47 seconds. Other incidents showed similar intervals: 53 seconds, 39 seconds, 58 seconds, never exceeding a minute. These timeframes prompted intense scrutiny from both law enforcement and independent researchers, who began theorizing that some environmental or experimental factor, possibly related to residual phenomena from the abandoned military facility, could trigger a disappearance only when conditions aligned perfectly. What further unsettled investigators was the multiplicity of sensory anomalies often associated with these brief events. Witnesses frequently reported unusual shadows, inexplicable hums, or a sudden chill in the air just before the disappearance occurred. In multiple instances, audio recordings captured faint whispers or pulsing frequencies similar to the hum on Emily's phone. Analysts concluded that these were not random occurrences but potentially integral to the mechanism behind the disappearances. The correlation between these sensory disturbances and the precise timing of each event reinforced the idea that an invisible force was at play, acting within very narrow temporal windows. The recognition of this pattern forced investigators to rethink every aspect of Emily's case. It suggested that what had claimed her presence on that gas station lot was not a conventional threat, but an anomalous phenomenon with repeatable, measurable characteristics. By linking her disappearance to a broader historical pattern, the team began to understand that Highway 47 had long been a corridor for these inexplicable events, and that Emily's case, while uniquely documented, fit squarely into a cycle that had been unfolding quietly for decades, leaving both law enforcement and the public to confront a terrifying possibility that defied all conventional understanding. Key point number 9 examines the role of local folklore and long-held rumors surrounding Highway 47, which suddenly gain weight and urgency in the aftermath of Emily Rhodes' disappearance. For years, townspeople had whispered about nights when the road felt thin, describing the sensation as though reality itself had grown fragile, as if the boundaries between the world they knew and something darker had weakened. These stories had been dismissed as superstition or exaggeration, told around campfires or in quiet conversations between neighbors. The thinness was said to manifest in fleeting anomalies, shadowy figures glimpsed from the corner of the eye, unexplained chills, and brief lapses in the perception of time, where minutes seemed to stretch or compress unpredictably. Emily, unusually perceptive and sensitive to such patterns, had once mentioned these rumors to friends, noting that she sometimes felt an inexplicable unease when driving that stretch of highway at night. At the time, her comments were shrugged off as the imaginings of a curious teenager, someone drawn to the eerie and unexplained. After her disappearance, these long-forgotten tales suddenly assumed a grim relevance. Investigators found themselves revisiting stories they had previously dismissed as anecdotal, recognizing a consistency between the folklore and the empirical anomalies surrounding Emily's case. Interviews with locals revealed that similar vanishings had been reported quietly over the decades, often recorded only in whispers or in private diaries, never in official records. These accounts described the same characteristics now observed in Emily's disappearance: sudden, inexplicable disappearances in mere seconds, accompanied by brief, unexplainable auditory or visual distortions, and occasionally, witnesses feeling an unshakable sense that the air around them had changed. Researchers began to consider whether these stories were not merely superstition but an oral record of repeated phenomena, an accumulation of memory-preserving events that defied conventional explanation. The folklore suggested that Highway 47 might possess unique environmental or temporal properties, creating conditions in which these interval vanishings could occur. Emily's remarks about the road's strangeness, once dismissed, now took on a prescient quality. It appeared she had perceived something others could not, sensing a vulnerability in the ordinary world that left those who entered it at the wrong moment open to forces they could not resist. The town's collective memory, filtered through decades of whispered rumor, began to converge with empirical evidence: CCTV anomalies, the hum captured on Emily's phone, eyewitness accounts, and the precise timing of disappearances. This convergence blurred the line between legend and fact, forcing investigators and residents alike to confront the possibility that the highway's thin nights were not figurative but literal manifestations of an unknown phenomenon. Emily's disappearance, occurring on one of these nights, seemed to confirm that the folklore had always contained a kernel of truth, and that the stories people had laughed off or dismissed as harmless superstition were in fact warnings about the fragile, perilous nature of that stretch of road. Key point number 10 centers on the final, haunting discovery in the CCTV footage of Emily Rhodes' disappearance, a single frame in which her silhouette appears duplicated, a phenomenon that confounds investigators and deepens the mystery surrounding her vanishing. As analysts combed through the grainy video, frame by frame, they noticed something impossible: a split image, where Emily's figure seemed to exist in two positions simultaneously. One outline showed her reaching forward as though to call for help or step toward safety, while the second appeared to be pulled away, leaning backward, as if an invisible force were tugging her from the world she knew. The duplication lasted only an instant, barely a fraction of a second, yet it was distinct enough to be recognized repeatedly, even after digital enhancement and stabilization. There was no evidence of video manipulation or camera malfunction capable of producing such an effect, leaving experts to grapple with the unsettling reality that the footage had captured something entirely outside the realm of conventional explanation. This frame became the focal point for both investigators and independent researchers trying to understand what had happened to Emily. It suggested a simultaneous interaction between two opposing forces, one anchoring her to the known world, the other pulling her into an unknown dimension or state. The duplication, impossible in any ordinary physical sense, implied that her disappearance was not instantaneous in a single timeline but rather a collision of overlapping realities. Witnesses who had seen Emily moments before her disappearance described her pausing in a manner that matched the first silhouette in the frame, but none could account for the second outline, reinforcing the sense that what claimed her was not a tangible person or object, but an intangible, almost predatory presence. The frame also sparked renewed examination of all other anomalies recorded that night. The flicker of the lights, the hum captured on her phone, and eyewitness accounts of strange shadows now seemed interconnected, each element forming part of a larger, coherent pattern pointing to a force operating beyond human perception. Audio experts noted that a faint harmonic resonance coincided precisely with the moment of the silhouette duplication, suggesting that whatever removed her from the visible world might have interacted with the environment in measurable ways. Psychologists and paranormal researchers alike debated the implications. Some theorized that the duplication represented a temporal echo, a residual imprint of Emily resisting the disappearance. Others suggested that the footage had inadvertently documented a moment in which her consciousness split, one tethered to the familiar world and one drawn into the incomprehensible void. Regardless of interpretation, the frame became the undeniable record of an event that defied physics, logic, and human understanding. It was the final, terrifying piece of evidence that cemented Emily Rhodes' disappearance as something wholly inexplicable, a momentary glimpse of a phenomenon that had claimed her in 47 seconds, leaving behind a lingering question that no one could fully answer.